welcome to today's webinar, which will be on inspiration for reformulation. I thought I'd start by telling you a little bit about who we are and why we're doing this. So IGD are a research and training charity, and we sit at the heart of the food and grocery industry. As a charity, we upskill people working in or looking to join the food and grocery industry, and we also manage initiatives driven by research and best practice relating to science, technology, or economics in the food industry. I'm Hannah Skeggs, and I'm a registered nutritionist working in our Nutrition and Scientific Affairs team at IGD. I look after our work on reformulation and front-of-pack nutrition labelling, but we also work on topics like portion size and healthy eating in the workplace. Everything we do is based on science, and we rely on the collaboration of manufacturers, retailers, and policymakers with an interest in the food industry. And we're really lucky to have an in-house team who undertakes regular consumer research, which informs everything we do. So, what will we cover today? I'll start the webinar with a brief introduction to the societal and political context surrounding reformulation and the challenges that these bring for industry. A big challenge is, of course, that what policymakers want often doesn't match up to what consumers want. So we'll take a look into our shopper insights to get a better understanding of health trends. At IGD, we talk to thousands of British grocery shoppers each year to explore their behaviour, their missions, sentiment and preferences across a range of different key industry themes and topics. These shoppers are demographically representative of the population. And then finally, we'll explore what companies can do to reformulate holistically, looking at what tactics should be considered for all-round product improvement, and we'll showcase industry case studies. We'll then signpost some of our free resources that will hopefully help your company's reformulation journey. So, as most of you will be very aware, the UK is experiencing an obesity epidemic. 29% of adults are now classified as obese, and future generations are set to be much worse. Nearly a quarter of our children are obese or overweight by the time they start primary school, aged 5, and this rises to about a third by the time they leave, aged 11. A number of nutrients have received the blame for this crisis in the media. Sugar is the first one, and it's often perceived as fueling the obesity epidemic. And consumers are responding to this belief by paying attention to nutrition labels a bit more, shifting purchasing habits, and becoming more open to reformulation. This has also led to a comprehensive sugar reduction plan and, of course, the sugar tax. But one of the big challenges around sugar is that obesity is, of course, attributed to an excess intake of energy rather than sugar. So reformulation targets are now being set to reduce the calories in many food categories. But on the opposite side of this, health is a really growing trend, with people expecting new and innovative products at low prices. Vegetarian, vegan and free-from diets are rapidly growing, with products being reformulated to meet these trends. So one example was a retailer's flexitarian beef mince, where half the red meat was substituted for lentils and pulses. This not only reduced the meat content and the fat content of the product, but it also increased the fibre available for consumers. So how can businesses create products like this that meet the demands of the population, whilst also driving the public health agenda? The great news is that health is really high on people's agenda. Around 88% of shoppers say that they're actively trying to improve their diet, although it's really hard to confirm whether or not this is reflected in actual consumption changes, and obviously we'll wait for the National Diet and Nutrition Survey to confirm this. Health is obviously not a new concept, but several factors are pushing it higher up the agenda. So firstly, people are living longer. And these older people are especially health conscious when we look at factors for health. And of course, the media is constantly showcasing stories with a health theme. So what we're really hearing is that healthy eating is becoming an increasingly critical factor for the food and grocery industry. That being said, we know that only a very small percentage, so around 3% of the population, are only eating healthy foods. The vast majority of us eat a balance of food, including treats, suggesting that reformulation is important actually across all food categories and eating occasions, but potentially to different degrees. So I'd like to do a quick poll here. So, of course, one of the challenges and opportunities for businesses is that health is incredibly personal. It varies by age, by gender, demographic, and just personal preference. So what do we think the number one priority of UK shoppers trying to eat more healthily is? Hopefully on screen you can see a multiple choice question that allows you to choose reducing calories, eating more fruit and veg, reducing sugar, or reducing portion size. If you could all take a moment to vote now. Fantastic, thank you so much for voting there. What's very interesting to me, but not particularly surprising, is that we're seeing that reducing sugar is expected to be the number one driver of health with consumers. You might actually be surprised to learn that eating more fruits and vegetables is reported as the top priority for shoppers who are trying to eat more healthily. Priorities people have range from increasing fruit and veg, fibre and protein to reducing sugar, fat, calories and salt. So this slide shows you the top priorities, and here we can see that the top 5 ways in which shoppers are trying to improve their diet are eating more fruit and vegetables. As expected, reducing sugar, sugary foods and drink is the second priority for people and is still really, really important. Most want to drink more fluids and reduce their snacking. And of course, it's really important for people to eat a balanced diet. And this really suggests that opportunities exist for products which help to support these shopper priorities and that still encourage them to eat a balanced diet. The chart here illustrates that the vast majority of people take responsibility for their own diets. But as the obesity epidemic worsens and the media pressure has increased over the last 5 years, actually consumers have become more and more open to reformulation, helping them on their way. Data from a survey of 1,000 shoppers last month shows that 78% of shoppers now agree that they're happy for food companies to change the recipe of products to make them healthier, provided they're still as tasty. But there are a few things that we must note here. So the first is that providing they're still as tasty is a huge caveat. Most of you will know that it's incredibly difficult to reformulate a product and make no sensory changes to the taste, smell, texture and visual appearance of a product. We know that many companies do aim for and often achieve this gold standard, but that takes time and resource that consumers are often unaware of. I guess I wonder if in time consumers will come to accept a minor taste adjustment in order to prioritise health, but we know that for most they're just not there yet. The second issue to point out with this figure is that although 78% of shoppers is demographically representative as a nation, it actually varies significantly by demographic. So shoppers in the upper and middle classes, so our ABC ones, of those 81% are open to consuming reformulated products. Whereas by comparison, the middle to lower class shoppers, so our C2, Ds and Ds and Es, are 10% less likely to accept these products at only 72%. The reason that this is really difficult for health is that the socioeconomic groups less likely to accept a reformulated product are also the ones with the highest prevalence of obesity and the highest levels of sugar and calorie intake according to NDNS data. One focus of Public Health England's Childhood Obesity Plan in Chapter 2 is to remove this demographic differentiation in health. So how do we make reformulated products more appealing to these specific consumers? The final point I'll make on this slide is that consumers' desire to be healthy varies significantly when out of home. We did a piece of research, Eating Well and Eating Out, and found that although eating out is on the rise and people are doing it more and more often, people are still viewing this eating occasion very differently to in-home occasions, and health is significantly less important in this situation. So what's important to shoppers? I guess when reformulating, it's really good to understand the consumer priorities. 87% of people think that the nutrition information available on pack is important, and for about 37% this actually influences purchasing decisions. Now, when 2/3 of food products provide traffic light nutrition labelling, we're seeing these colours are often forming numerical targets for businesses to reformulate to, so attempting to remove potentially from a red nutrient on front of pack to an amber nutrient. Interestingly, naturality remains a key requirement for shoppers, but removed ingredients are more important than those added or fortified. And this is interesting because it's often hard to remove fats, calories and sugars whilst maintaining naturality. For example, if you removed a sugar, you might want to replace it with a high-intensity sweetener, and fats might need to be replaced by starches or thickeners. So whatever you're adding to your recipe, it's important to consider how the consumer will perceive its appearance later on in the ingredients list. And in the theme of naturality, negative nutrient press really seems to be influencing purchasing drivers. So last year, the UK spent 2.5 times more money on new product launches with a no nutrient claim than an added nutrient claim. So this is things like no added sugar or gluten-free, as opposed to high fibre or enriched with vitamin D. This often doesn't incentivize industry to fortify or add potentially expensive positive ingredients like vitamins or novel fibres. And it also causes us to question whether consumers associate health more with restricting foods and food groups than with increasing these positive nutrients. I guess reinforcing that, in 2016, we did a large consultation of 213 companies spanning manufacturers, retailers, caterers, and out of home to understand the drivers and barriers to reformulation. I'm sure you won't be surprised to see that the focus areas were sugar, energy, fat, and salt, which are all nutrients to reduce. So how have these developed for industry in the last few years? Well, our research into sugars and sweeteners last year showed that 55% of shoppers want to reduce their sugar intake. The type of sugars that most adults and children in the UK eat too much of are free sugars. And UK guidance suggests that no more than 5% of energy intake comes from free sugars, which equates to roughly 30 grams a day in adults and less in children. You can see from the chart on this slide that 87% of the population are eating too much free sugar, and on average we're eating more than twice as much as the government recommendation. And this is true for all age groups. But I suppose it's not all bad. The great news is that following lots of innovation, reformulation, and the media pressure is that average intakes of free sugars in all children and in adult men aged 19 to 64 are significantly lower in the current National Diet and Nutrition Survey, so the years 7 and 8 combined, compared with years 1 and 2 combined. And this is the first time that we've seen this kind of decline in sugar intakes. In children, that reduction of free sugars is thought to be in part due to the decrease in consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages, and that's significantly lower in children aged 4 to 10 years in the current survey compared to 8 years ago. So why has some of this reformulation taken place? I'm sure most of you will be aware of this, but just to summarise, in 2016, as a response to the high sugar intakes, the Department of Health and Public Health England introduced 2 sugar reduction strategies as part of their childhood obesity plan. The first strategy was a sugar reduction of 20% by 2020, and this was a voluntary industry-wide reformulation plan. The 9 food categories that contributed the most sugar to children's diet were focused on, and then targets were set to reduce the sales weighted average of sugar content in these categories by 20% by 2020. And PHE have also launched a follow-up to this to capture any milk-based drinks that fall outside of the soft drinks industry levy, which was the second lever that they used there. So the soft drinks industry levy can be seen on the right-hand side of this slide. It came into force last year, and it's a treasury tax on the manufacturers of high sugar drinks. And these are 2 different tax thresholds that can be seen on the slide. Some manufacturers have absorbed the cost of this tax, and others have passed it on to consumers, which has actually caused further shifting into the diet or lower sugar alternative drinks because they're now perceived as being cheaper as well. And whilst many companies had already started reformulating before these programs, they did increase the pressure on industry, and as such, the average sugar content of soft drinks and categories like yogurt have significantly declined. So we expect the next National Diet and Nutrition Survey to show even further improvements in sugar consumption. Salt has also been focused on by the government. And since the introduction of targets in 2006, the salt levels have been reduced by around 40%. The difference between this reformulation plan and with sugar is that it was done by stealth, and it was done across industry, and it was done over a long period of time, which has hopefully allowed consumers to become more accustomed to a less salty taste. A lot of things about the salt reduction program are heroed, and we're hoping that we can take some of those learnings into sugar and calories in the future. So the latest area of focus is, of course, calories, and it's arguably the main cause of the obesity epidemic. We're just eating too much energy. Public Health England's upcoming calorie reduction programme will challenge the food industry to achieve a 20% reduction in calories by 2024 in product categories that contribute significantly to children's calorie intakes, and where there is scope for substantial reformulation or portion size reduction. This particular work spans retailers, manufacturers, restaurants, pubs, cafes, takeaways and delivery services, and all other out-of-home eating occasions. And the products covered include things like ready meal, pizzas, savoury snack products, sauces and dressings. It doesn't cover any foods that are already included in the sugar reduction programme, so that we can get the largest public benefit. But of course, whilst we're focusing on nutrients to remove, we have to remember that when reformulating a product, you can't just take something out. You need to replace the ingredient. So how do we choose what to add back in? You're probably aware that directly substituting different carbohydrates or sugars and protein will not deliver a calorie reduction, because each protein, 1 gram of protein contributes 4 calories and 1 gram of carbohydrates contributes 4 calories. So they can't be swapped to achieve a calorie reduction. That being said, calorie reductions can be achieved by reducing fats, by reducing portion size, by potentially aerating a product to reduce its overall weight but maintain bulk, or by using things like high-intensity sweeteners. Another area to consider are fibres, which, due to being partly insoluble, may reduce the calorie content of a food and can often be used in place of sugars and sometimes fat. And there are many different types of fibre. So these can help you reduce sugar, reduce fat and calories. They can help you with replacing structuring properties from removing fat and sugar. And they can also help you make health and nutrition claims on your products. As a population, we're currently pretty deficient in fibre. We're consuming 12 grams less fibre than recommended every single day. And interestingly, consumers are becoming increasingly interested in fibre, in its role in society and in the gut microbiome. Fibre can help companies make these nutrition and health claims, and it's really considered a positive component in the HFSS advertising nutrient profiling model. So to explain that a little more, fibre can in some cases be used to offset a negative score caused by having high fat, high salt, or high sugar in your products. So last year, IGD worked with 18 manufacturers and retailers from across the industry to create a comprehensive technical guide, which you can see on the screen, called Fibre Join the Movement. And associated with this, we have a one-pager for category teams. We have consumer research available on our website, and we have lots of tips on which fibres to consider based on your product category and the type of reformulation you're trying to achieve. So please do check that out on our website if you want any more information. So to summarise a little bit what we've just been through, there are many consumer and political drivers to reformulate. However, the reformulation programmes and consumer trends continue to evolve. So how can businesses reformulate a product holistically to stay ahead of the trends rather than playing catch up? I guess really reformulating holistically means considering the whole product and not just focusing on a single nutrient. So you can do this by assessing the full list of ingredients, their naturality and the manufacturing process, and thinking about how a product is cooked and processed as well. It's important here to really understand the role that each ingredient is playing in your product, whether it affects the taste, the texture, the aroma, the safety, the price, the colour. We know that ingredients add so much to a product, and you need to try and maintain that whole profile when reformulating. And although we know consumers are more open to reformulation now than ever before, this will of course vary by brand and category. So try to understand how willing consumers are for you to alter your specific products, again considering taste, texture and on-pack claims. When making product changes, always try to replace ingredients with healthier ones, like fibre, and think about whether you can make claims such as vitamin D supports normal immune function, or high fibre, or reduced sugar, as we know that consumers are looking for these nutrition and health claims and they're using them to make quick purchasing decisions. So bearing all of that in mind, I'd like to take you through a few case studies so that we can look at what some of industry have done already. So my first case study is looking at an ingredient change from Asda. So Asda are committed to reformulating to reduce energy, fat, saturated fat, salt and sugar from their own brand products. And in 2018, they launched 2 low-sugar granolas that contain no free sugar or added sweeteners. In granola, sugar performs a lot of different functions, and in addition to sweetness, it also causes the binding of the component ingredients to form the clusters that consumers expect. In order to bind the clusters in the absence of sugar, Asda used maltodextrin fibre as a liquid, which was used in the same quantities as sugar for their other granola products. Maltodextrin fibre is a little different to the more common form of maltodextrin, which is considered a sugar, although they are very similar. In maltodextrin fibre, the molecules are unique and they're not fully digestible and therefore are classified as a fibre and add less calories into the overall product. Maltodextrin fibre doesn't contribute the sweet flavour, but it does replace the functional role of sugar in granola for binding. And customers have fed back to Asda that actually they love the products as they're healthy, low in sugar and contain a variety of flavoursome fruits, nuts and seeds. On an entirely different tact, Sainsbury's looked at how changing processing could make a difference to the products they were offering. So this case study shows that actually a very small change can make a huge difference. So with a simple processing change, Sainsbury's reduced the amount of fat in its hash browns by 1.6 tonnes and removed 14.7 million calories annually. For this activity, they managed to achieve a calorie and fat reduction by just changing the cooking method of their hash browns. So now instead of deep fat frying hash browns, their in-store cafes oven bake them. The great news is that when Sainsbury's tested the oven-baked hash browns with consumers, they actually discovered that the product scored better both on consumer acceptance for taste, but also on appearance when compared to the fried version. And now I'll look at a Tesco example where we've used front-of-pack nutrition labelling to drive reformulation of products. So when customers asked Tesco's to make its food-to-go range healthier, a project began with a focus on reducing fat and turning as many front-of-pack traffic lights from red to amber. Tesco decided to start with this activity with sandwiches, as they're some of the highest selling and consumed foods and would have a positive impact towards the health of a large proportion of consumers. The sandwich range was first assessed on the front-of-pack nutrition status and ranked in order of highest levels of fat. Then the common ingredients across the highest fat lines were identified, and mayonnaise and butter were highlighted as actually the most common ingredients, and therefore they were targeted specifically. So reduced fat mayonnaise replaced the higher fat version, and Tesco's found that where mayonnaise was already added to the sandwich, butter could generally be removed, as in you don't need both. And the sandwiches were then reviewed to check the impact to the bread and the overall flavour, and found generally positive results. So during this review, Tesco checked and reviewed several different aspects to ensure that the flavour of the sandwich wasn't compromised, that the sandwich maintained its quality, that there was no consistency change, and that microbiological growth was not negatively affected due to the recipe change or the change in water levels. Of course, with every reformulation, there are likely to be challenges. And in this particular example, when Tesco and their supplier started using the reduced fat mayonnaise, it actually caused some viscosity and depositing inconsistencies when putting the mayonnaise onto the sandwich. And this meant that there were inconsistencies with the final product weight and, of course, the taste. They managed to solve this issue by running numerous trials to tweak the settings and ensure that the new mayonnaise was deposited consistently by the time that they launched. And the main sandwich changes took approximately 9 months to launch from the initial concept, but they did see huge improvements in the front-of-pack nutrition labelling and the overall nutrition of the sandwich range. The best part was, of course, that they didn't get many complaints from consumers, and actually, in some cases, they received some very positive feedback. And then a bit of an outside-the-box example. So Noble Foods are the owner of the UK's largest free-range egg brand, the Happy Egg Company. And they've recently transformed their entire range of eggs to offer eggs that are richer in vitamin D than standard eggs. So many of you will know that in the UK it's estimated that 1 in 5 adults are deficient in vitamin D. And this widespread problem has led to Public Health England issuing new guidance in 2016 that recommended an increase in daily intake. After quite a lot of research with Newcastle University, Happy Eggs found that changing the feed that they fed their chickens actually resulted in an enriched egg, meaning that nothing is directly added to the egg, just to the chicken. And I just want to reassure everybody that there are no harmful effects to the chicken of feeding them this new food. And it really shows that actually we must think about the entire food chain when we're looking to reformulate it. It's very easy to look at a list of ingredients, but actually potentially where we source our ingredients, whether we use fortified flour, for example, can really change the overall nutrition of a product. So what happens if you're unable to reformulate? For certain things, it's just harder to reformulate, and there are certain products, potentially like chocolates, where we know that actually some consumers would rather have a small but great chocolate than a large reformulated chocolate. So in these situations, it's worth considering whether you can reduce portion size. Some consumers are quite open to portion size reduction, but sadly many consumers still associate this with shrinkflation, with companies trying to make more money by selling them less product. That being said, those aged 18 to 24 and those who are 65 and over are more likely to eat smaller portion sizes as a way of improving their diet. Those living in the Midlands are also more focused on this, and there are no significant differences by gender or by income group. So I think this is an area that we'll really see expanding in the coming years. Finally, there are various things that you can be doing to make your product healthier and to really cash in on the trends that we looked at from consumers earlier. Reformulation is only part of this. But if you do decide that reformulation is the best option for your business, IGD have an extensive range of free resources and guidance created by us and industry nutritionists and academics available on igd.com/healthy eating. And you can also sign up to our Healthy Eating newsletter for the latest updates. This comes out about every other month, so we won't be spamming you, but every time we have great new consumer research or free guidance, you'll be the first to know about it. So in conclusion, shoppers are really open to reformulation, more so than ever, but taste remains key. There are many ways to approach reformulation, but it's really best to try and do it holistically. We hope that this will really save people money in the long run and help people to keep ahead of the growing and evolving trends. Fibre can positively support reformulation, and overarchingly, there are many free resources available on our website, lots of case studies, so please do go and check them out, or get in touch with us if you do want any further information on reformulation. So I'll now take a little moment. If you do have any questions, please do send them in and we'll start to answer them. If you'd like to pick up directly with me after this event, my email is available on the screen, so please do get in touch. So I'm going to take the first question. So this question is that fibre is hugely important and we have this 12-gram gap. So how do we get it to become mandatory to have that included on nutritional information? We need to help consumers make the right decisions. This is a really interesting question, and we did lots of consumer research about fibre. One of the things that we did was some video diaries of consumers as they tried to follow what they're seeing in store. And it was really, really interesting to see that you're completely right here. Consumers are totally baffled by fibre. They don't know how much they need to get, and they can't find any information about it on pack. There was a lovely visual of a lady looking at 2 boxes of cereal, one that says source of fibre and another that said high in fibre. But she couldn't actually find the grammage of fibre and didn't know which one was therefore better for her. I think this is really important to be able to give that information about fibre to consumers, but obviously at the moment, because of food information to consumers regulation, we're not in a position to mandatorily have that across back of pack. We do, however, know that the Department of Health and Social Care are reviewing not only back of pack but front of pack nutrition information, potentially in the wake of Brexit, to see how we might alter these and make more things mandatory. So I think, sadly, this is a watch this space. We are working very hard and very closely with Department of Health to make sure that they realise how important fibre is and that it can support existing targets and public health goals. So another question here is whether the sugar tax is likely to be extended. So this is an interesting one. Obviously, the sugar tax is being reviewed at the moment, and initial data from Kantar is showing that it looks like it's been pretty successful for two reasons, really. One, it's really pushed reformulation to increase in speed, but also in the amount of sugar that was removed from products. It's very, very unusual to see companies take 30 to 40% of the sugar out of a product in one go, but that's what we have witnessed during the soft drinks industry levy. And so on top of that, we also know that fiscal measures have been successful. We seem to be selling less full sugar drinks, and we know that there's been a shift with promotional activities for that. So if you take Pepsi and Coca-Cola, they have big commitments out that they will now only promote their diet drinks rather than the full sugar versions. So again, we know that that's been successful, but it's really far more challenging in other categories. And I think this is something that the Treasury needs to understand, that, you know, I know that people have made significant efforts to reduce the sugar in soft drinks, but actually it's been relatively easy to substitute sugar for high intensity sweeteners or to reduce the sweeter taste because of the fact that it doesn't particularly play a role there in colour or in texture. When we look at other categories where the dishes of more composite natures, where they might have more texture, actually sugar plays a variety of functions, so it's much harder to reduce these, and I'm not so sure that a sugar tax would be easy in these areas. Another one, so do we get regular new case studies? Yes, we do. Not as many as we'd like though, so we really do rely on industry sharing their case studies. So if you do have a great case study of an innovation or a reformulation of a product, we would really love to have that case study and to highlight it on our website in presentations like this, and also on our newsletter if you're happy for that. So please do get in touch if you've got any great case studies. I think I'll end there, but please do email me with any questions if you think of any after the event. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you giving up your lunchtime.